This video details the procedure for replacing the valve cover gasket on a 93 Suzuki Sidekick and a Geo Tracker as well with the 1.6 liter engine. It may also apply to other year models. The tools you will need for this are a ratchet with a 10 and 12 millimeter socket, a pair of pliers, and a flat tip screwdriver. A short extension for the ratchet would be helpful, but it's not necessary. Begin by removing the 4 10 millimeter bolts holding the plastic cover on the air plenum. Remove the plastic cover and pay attention to this bit of fiberglass insulation that's underneath it. That will come into play shortly. Now switch to your 12 millimeter socket and begin to remove the aluminum plenum from the mounting brackets on the engine. There should be 3 bolts, one here on the plenum right above the fuel injector, and 2 more that are just below the rubber air duct here. Next, you'll remove this 112 millimeter nut here on this ear on the plenum. Now you remember that fiberglass insulation I was talking about? Well, underneath that is hidden another nut. So don't go prying around on that plenum without removing this one as well. Next, you'll remove the vacuum hoses, and they just slip on. It may take a little bit of wiggling around to get things apart. You shouldn't need to disconnect any more hoses, and you don't have to disconnect the plenum. Just move it over out of the way. The spark plug wires and throttle cable are attached to clips that are mounted to the valve cover. You don't have to disconnect the spark plugs or the throttle cable. There's a hose clamp on this vacuum hose on top, and this is the only time you will need the pliers. And a lot of times they stick, so I just twist on the rubber a little bit and usually breaks loose. Pops right off. Once again, we mount the 10 millimeter socket on the ratchet and begin to break loose the 4 valve cover bolts. Once you have those bolts removed, it's simply a matter of pulling the valve cover up. It will pop loose off the top of the head, and you just work it out from underneath the wires. Now that you have the valve cover off, begin to take the old gasket off the valve cover and replace it with your new parts. It's always a good idea to wipe the valve cover off and also the head on the engine, just to get all any kind of grime out of there that might keep your new valve cover gasket from sealing well. The gasket only goes on one way, and of course you have a 50-50 chance of getting it wrong, so flip it over if you do. Your gasket kit should also include new rubber bushings that go around the valve cover bolt and a little metal washer. Replace those as well. Then it's time to put the valve cover back on. Just be careful not to knock the gasket off as you're squeezing it into this space. You want to make sure everything's seated properly, so be a little gentle here. Then everything goes back together just the way it came apart. I'm not going to mention anything about the torque values because I didn't torque anything. I just snugged everything down and checked it for leaks, and it looked good. You can look up torque values yourself if you like.